These are the most shocking, interesting historical photos and unusual objects from the past. Let's get 100,000 subscribers. Iranian soldiers stand on the border, watching black smoke choke the horizon. Hundreds of Kuwaiti oil wells burn uncontrollably, set ablaze by retreating Iraqi troops in 1991. The sky itself turns to fire, a man-made apocalypse of crude. A disabled man with polio leans on a cane, selling matches on a London street around 1900. His thin frame, worn clothes, and simple goods expose the brutal reality of Victorian poverty. Survival depended on pennies from strangers passing by. Ella Williams, born 1865 in South Carolina, performed as Madame Aboma, the African giantess. She stood over 7 feet tall and toured across Europe, Africa, and South America. Her size and strength made her a global sensation of the late 19th century. Japanese sailors stand on the deck of an aircraft carrier, waving as a plane departs. The date is December 7th, 1941, minutes before the attack on Pearl Harbor. This mission would drag the United States into World War II. Robert F. Kennedy stands at the podium in Los Angeles after winning California's primary on June 5, 1968. The crowd cheers as he delivers his final public words. Minutes later, his campaign and life ended suddenly. Wilbur Wright lies at the controls of the damaged flyer after a failed attempt at Kitty Hawk, December 14, 1903. The fragile machine rests broken in the sand, the dream of flight not yet realized. 3 days later, Orville would make history here with the world's first powered flight. May 25, 1965, Muhammad Ali faces Sonny Liston in Lewiston, Maine. In the first round, Ali's punch drops Liston in one of boxing's most controversial moments. This fight cemented Ali's legend and produced one of sport's most iconic images. During Prohibition, Vino Sano grape bricks were sold across the U.S. The box contained dried grapes pressed into a block. Labels warned how not to let it ferment into wine, effectively giving buyers the recipe. In 1940, Nazi-occupied France forced Citroën to build vehicles for the German army. Engineers secretly lowered the oil dipstick fill line. This sabotage caused engines to seize under heavy use, crippling German trucks from within. The royal casket, created in 1800 by Izabela Czartoryska, contained 73 precious relics once belonging to Polish royalty. It was looted by the Wehrmacht during the German invasion of Poland in World War II and has never been recovered. Tehran, Iran, a woman sits unveiled in public. Around her, others follow mandatory dress codes. The act directly violates the country's laws on female appearance. Patrick Swayze trains as a dancer in the 1970s. Before Hollywood fame, he studied ballet and performed on stage. His discipline in dance shaped the power and grace of his later acting career. A London tram rolls across temporary tracks in 1906. Beneath it, workers construct the Piccadilly line of the Underground. The scene shows 2 eras of transport colliding above and below ground. 1972, Telford, England. Nationwide power cuts during miners' strikes. A woman eats by candlelight inside her home. Outside stand the cooling towers of Ironbridge Power Station. 1937, Durham, England. A coal miner washes in a tin tub after work. His wife scrubs his back beside the kitchen fire. Bill Brandt's photo shows the harsh reality of mining life. Carolyn Jones poses with a pistol in a 1957 promotional still. The photo was for Don Siegel's noir crime film, Babyface Nelson. Jones later became best known for her role as Morticia Addams in The Addams Family. This bone comb was found in a warrior's grave in Freidingen, Germany. Dating to the early 7th century CE, it features detailed carvings and a fitted protective case. Today it is preserved in the Landesmuseum Württemberg. Germany, early 1930s. A soup kitchen serves children during the Great Depression. A woman pours milk into a boy's bowl as others wait barefoot in line. The scene reflects mass poverty and hunger in Weimar-era Germany. This is the Ethiopian Bible, written on goatskin in the early 5th century. It is considered the oldest and most complete illustrated Christian Bible. Its survival makes it one of the greatest treasures of early Christianity. A 37-million-year-old whale fossil lies exposed in Egypt's Wadi al-Hitan desert. The massive spine curves across the sand, perfectly preserved. This site, known as the Valley of the Whales, reveals the ancestors of modern whales. Marilyn Monroe in 1945, before her rise to Hollywood fame. She poses in a farm field holding a lamb, only 19 years old at the time. This was one of her earliest photo sessions as Norma Jean. Alan Shepard sits inside the Freedom 7 capsule on May 5, 1961. Minutes later, he became the first American in space. The suborbital flight lasted just 15 minutes, but marked a turning point in the space race. July 1945, New Mexico. Workers prepare the Gadget, the first atomic device. It was hoisted onto a tower at the Trinity test site. Days later, it detonated, marking the dawn of the nuclear age. Russian prisoners of war sweep cobblestone streets in northern Germany. The year is 1915, in the middle of World War I. Captured soldiers were forced into labor far from the front. Charles Sherwood Stratton, known as Tom Thumb, was a star in P.T. Barnum's shows. In 1863, he married Lavinia Warren in a widely publicized wedding. He died 2 decades later at the age of 45. 1914, Germany. Prisoners of war at Zossen camp weave shoes from straw. Men sit and stand in rows, twisting fibers into crude footwear. The image shows forced labor conditions during World War I. Around 1900, Harry Houdini posed bound in chains for a publicity photograph. Known as the escape artist, he was famous for breaking free from restraints. This image became one of the most iconic symbols of his career. 1948, the U.S. Air Force's experimental Northrop YB-49 jet bomber takes flight. The radical flying wing design carried no fuselage or tail. At 100 tons, it was a technological leap decades ahead of its time. July 1939, Pittsboro, North Carolina. A handwritten sign advertises a piccolo party. It was posted on a utility pole near the town's post office. Such gatherings reflected small-town community life during the Depression era. It's 1925, Glen Echo Park, Maryland. A fortune-telling booth labeled Madame Carreta Gypsy Camp. Signs promise readings of past, present, and future. Visitors sit outside as palmistry and mysticism draw curious crowds. January 1945. A pile of prosthetic limbs photographed inside Auschwitz after its liberation. These belonged to prisoners who had been killed in the camp. The image stands as stark evidence of Nazi crimes during the Holocaust. Samuel Morse first demonstrated his single-wire telegraph in the 1830s. The device revolutionized long-distance communication and led to the creation of Morse code. Commercial use lasted into the late 20th century, with the final U.S. transmission sent in 1999. March 1947. Police entered the Collier Brothers' Harlem home at 2078 Fifth Avenue. Inside, they found the house crammed wall-to-wall with newspapers, boxes, and debris. The brothers had lived in isolation for decades, their hoarding ending in tragedy. In 1958, Bad Axe, Michigan, locals staged an alien hoax. A man in a crude homemade suit was photographed by police. The bizarre stunt became known as the Alien Mugshot. 1920-1933, United States. A woman is caught smuggling bottles strapped beneath her skirt. Prohibition banned alcohol nationwide, fueling widespread bootlegging. Hidden flasks, false clothing, and secret compartments became common smuggling tactics. 1968. Scene from the British horror film The Devil Rides Out. Actors lie inside a ritual circle, surrounded by candles. The film, based on Dennis Wheatley's novel, became a cult classic of occult cinema. Early 1900s, children pose with giant watermelons. The photo was used to promote agricultural fairs and seed companies. Such images symbolized abundance and prosperity. Soviet aircraft designers Andrei Tupolev, left, and Sergei Ilyushin, right. Both were leading figures of 20th century aviation, creating legendary bombers and passenger planes. Their designs shaped Soviet air power during World War II and the Cold War. November 20th, 1943, U.S. soldiers of the 165th Infantry Regiment weighed ashore at Butaritari Island. The landing was part of the Battle of Makin in the Gilbert Islands campaign. It marked one of the first major American amphibious assaults in the Pacific War. These German soldiers were a few of the thousands of prisoners taken by the Red Army recently along the Russian front. Russia, 1943. November 10th, 1989. East German officers stand uncertain at Checkpoint Charlie as a West Berliner offers a handshake. The Berlin Wall had fallen just the day before. This moment captured the collapse of decades of division between East and West. German soldiers carry a coffin draped in the swastika flag during a military funeral. Wehrmacht troops were buried with full honors, often accompanied by military bands. Even in wartime, Nazi Germany staged such ceremonies to project discipline and respect for its fallen. A peasant family sits down for dinner in a modest wooden hut in Ryazan Governorate, Russian Empire, late 19th century. A simple round loaf of bread is placed at the center of the table, shared under the light of a kerosene lamp. Icons on the wall highlight the strong role of Orthodox faith in peasant life. Russian officers' amusement, 1910. A cavalryman on horseback leaps over a long dining table during a staged spectacle, while fellow officers watch and cheer. Such daring stunts were a popular form of entertainment in the pre-revolutionary army. Yuri Gagarin filming during parachute training, February 18, 1960. Just over a year later, on April 12, 1961, he would become the first human in space aboard Vostok 1. This training was part of the Soviet space program's preparation for orbital missions. A destroyed German convoy on the highway near Vitebsk during Operation Bagration, June 23-24, 1944. The Soviet offensive encircled and annihilated German Army Group Center, marking one of the Wehrmacht's greatest defeats. Thousands of vehicles, artillery, and supplies were lost in the collapse. Two small Dutch immigrant children stand on the steps in 1910. The boy holds official documents, while the girl clutches a doll and paper. They had just arrived in America, part of a wave of early 20th century European migration. Audrey Hepburn and Anthony Perkins were photographed together on a plane in the United Kingdom in 1962. Both stars were at the height of their Hollywood careers. Hepburn fresh off Breakfast at Tiffany's, 1961, and Perkins still known for Psycho, 1960. This candid snapshot captures the glamour of early jet-age travel and the golden era of cinema icons. A patrol of Wehrmacht sappers moving on rail trolleys captures a switch at a Soviet railway station. The photo dates to the early stages of Operation Barbarossa in 1941, when German troops rapidly advanced into Soviet territory. Such units were tasked with securing rail lines for supplies and reinforcements, a critical element of the German war strategy. In 1965, George Lincoln Rockwell, leader of the American Nazi Party, confronted Martin Luther King Jr. during a civil rights demonstration. Rockwell was known for appearing at marches to provoke activists with racist and anti-Semitic rhetoric. King, committed to nonviolent resistance, continued his campaign for racial equality despite such hostile encounters. In 1982, Soviet workers inscribed a political message on a pipeline under construction in the USSR. The slogan read, "To your sanctions, a pipe, Mr. Reagan," mocking U.S. economic restrictions imposed by President Ronald Reagan. It symbolized the Soviet Union's defiance during the Cold War energy disputes. In 1994, Aishwarya Rai won the Miss World pageant in Sun City, South Africa. Here she is, photographed with her mother, eating lunch on the floor in India. She is still wearing her Miss World crown and sash during the meal. On April 16, 1945, U.S. infantrymen advanced through the destroyed German town of Waldenburg. The town had been heavily bombarded, leaving most buildings reduced to rubble and smoke. This scene occurred in the final weeks of World War II in Europe. This 3,200-year-old ostracon from Deir el-Medina, Egypt, records worker attendance on a construction project. The document lists reasons for absence such as embalming brother, brewing beer, and bitten by scorpion. It offers a rare glimpse into the daily lives and challenges of ancient Egyptian laborers. This 1932 cigarette card features a dressed-up cat holding an umbrella, posed for promotional photography. Cigarette cards were collectible inserts placed in packs to stiffen packaging and advertise brands. Salvador Dali and Coco Chanel, 1938, photographed together during a cigarette break. The picture was taken in France before World War II. Cuba, 1962. A young woman stands guard with a rifle outside a bank in Havana. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, Fidel Castro ordered civilians to help defend the capital. Auschwitz, 1945. Prisoners celebrate their liberation after the Red Army discovered and freed the concentration camp. The Soviet troops entered Auschwitz on January 27, 1945, rescuing around 7,000 surviving prisoners. The oldest Austrian soldier of World War I, 79-year-old Gaspar Wallnefer, photographed in September 1917. He was also a veteran of the Habsburg campaigns in Italy in 1848 and 1866. The Tower of Togrul in Ray, Iran, photographed in the 1850s by Luigi Pichi. Built in the 12th century as the tomb of Seljuk ruler Togrul, the founder of the Seljuk Empire, it originally had a dome that collapsed in an earthquake. The tower today stands 20 meters, 66 ft tall. A guard stands beside the snitch box in a U.S. prison, 1956. Prisoners could anonymously provide information about fellow inmates in exchange for favors or leniency. The system was controversial as it both maintained order and fueled mistrust among prisoners. Reporters and spectators watch from boats as smoke rises over Alcatraz during the prison riot of May 1946. The uprising, later called the Battle of Alcatraz, lasted 2 days and involved 6 inmates attempting to escape. By the end, 2 guards and 3 prisoners were dead, with many others wounded. Doctors examine an emaciated Union soldier after his release from a Confederate prison camp in 1863. Conditions in southern prisons like Andersonville led to starvation, disease, and high mortality among captives. By the end of the Civil War, more than 56,000 soldiers had died in prison camps on both sides. A black cat is seen staring at a drawing of another cat made by Romanian-born artist Saul Steinberg. The photo was taken in the New York studio of photographer Guillaume Mili in 1947. Steinberg was best known for his work for The New Yorker, where his witty illustrations became iconic. This photo shows Louise Weber, better known as La Goulou, a famous French can-can dancer of the late 19th century. She earned the nickname La Goulou, the glutton, for her habit of drinking customers' drinks while dancing at the Moulin Rouge in Paris. Often called the Queen of Montmartre, she became an icon of Parisian nightlife during the Belle Époque, immortalized in posters by Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec. This photo, taken in Prague in 1920, shows an early mechanized street sweeper. The vehicle, marked Hlavní Město, Praha, capital city of Prague, was designed to clean cobblestone streets more efficiently than manual labor. Such machines were rare at the time and represented one of the first attempts at municipal mechanization in Czechoslovakia after World War I.
This photo shows a firefighter inside the Seventh Heaven restaurant at the Austin Kino TV Tower after the devastating fire on August 27, 2000. The blaze, caused by an electrical short in cable shafts, raged for over 24 hours, killing 3 people and nearly collapsing the tower. The famous revolving restaurant was destroyed and only reopened in 2011. Pakistani women burned their headscarves in protest against General Zia-ul-Haq's Islamist regime, 1983. Zia enforced strict Sharia-based laws, including mandatory veiling, sparking resistance from the Women's Action Forum, which became a symbol of defiance against state-imposed religious conservatism. A puppy rescued by a soldier of the U.S. 503rd Parachute Infantry Regiment 2nd Battalion, Iceland, 1944. American paratroopers stationed in Iceland often bonded with local animals while preparing for airborne operations in Europe during World War II. Advertisement for a special flask designed for women, France, 1924. During the 1920s, such discreet accessories became fashionable as women embraced greater social freedom and the glamour of the Jazz Age. The Volkswagen Type 82 was a German military vehicle in 1944. Due to fuel shortages, many were converted to run on wood gas generators, burning wood instead of gasoline. This adaptation showed the desperate ingenuity of the German war effort in its final years. London, 1927. 2 women ride a cargo tricycle along Pall Mall, delivering goods with bread and a puppy in hand. Bicycle couriers like this were common in the city before vans dominated deliveries. The amused faces capture the mix of practicality and playfulness in post-World War London life. St. Petersburg, 1904. Tsar Nicholas II rides with his entourage during a military parade on the Field of Mars. Such parades showcase the prestige of the Russian Empire's cavalry and emphasized Nicholas II's role as supreme commander. Just over a decade later, the empire he led would collapse with the Russian Revolution. Maria Popova, a nurse during the Russian Civil War in 1917, later became the prototype for Anka the machine gunner, the famous character in the Soviet film Chapayev, 1934. The film turned her image into a lasting symbol of women's heroism in battle. A hippopotamus at the London Zoo in Regent's Park, photographed in the summer of 1852. It was one of the first hippos ever brought to Britain, drawing massive crowds of curious Victorians who had never seen the animal before. Walt Disney with performers in costume during the ice show, Walt Disney's Toy Shop, 1950. This early production brought his famous animated characters to life on ice, decades before Disney on Ice became a global phenomenon. Indian infantry training in trench warfare, 1915. The soldiers wear early improvised gas masks, cloth hoods with glass eye slits, to prepare for chemical attacks, which had just been introduced on the Western Front during World War I. These troops were part of the British Indian Army, which played a crucial role in Europe and the Middle East. Wreckage of a German Messerschmitt fighter in Stalingrad, 1943. After the crushing Soviet victory, the city was littered with destroyed aircraft, tanks, and equipment from the encircled Sixth Army. This scene symbolizes both the devastation of the battle and the turning point of World War II on the Eastern Front. Workers of the Metro construction project ride as the very first passengers of the Moscow Metro, 1935. The opening of the Metro was a major milestone in Soviet engineering, celebrated as both a symbol of modernity and a triumph of collective labor. Billboard in Wisconsin during the 1979 oil crisis urges drivers to fight back, drive 55, alongside the face of Ayatollah Khomeini. The U.S. lowered speed limits to save fuel amid shortages triggered by the Iranian Revolution. German soldiers inspect the destroyed French Char B-1 bis tank number 341 Vougeot, knocked out on June 12, 1940, near Vadenay during the battle for Mourmelon-le-Grand. The tank was lost when a German shell struck directly into the barrel of its 75mm gun during reloading, detonating inside. In 1940, German Red Cross vehicles lined up in Oslo after the invasion of Norway. They waited for the battle between German and Norwegian forces to end before collecting the wounded. Under the Geneva Conventions, both sides' soldiers were transported in these same ambulances. In 1985, first-year students of the Kazan Aviation Institute performed a mass aerobics display at Lenin Stadium in Kazan. Thousands of participants moved in perfect unison as part of Soviet physical culture propaganda. Such synchronized performances were staged nationwide to showcase discipline and collective strength. In 1966, a U.S. B-52 bomber carrying 4 nuclear bombs crashed near Palomares, Spain. 2 bombs broke apart on impact, contaminating the area with plutonium, though no nuclear detonation occurred. The disaster forced the U.S. to drastically reduce daily nuclear-armed flights from 24 to 4. In 1912, Dutch anthropologists measured the skulls of Frisian islanders to define what a true Dutch person should look like. Such racial anthropology was common across Europe and later fueled dangerous ideologies. Today, these photos stand as stark reminders of pseudoscience used to justify discrimination. California National Guard troops pose with the experimental track layer Best 75 tank near San Francisco, 1917. Built on a tractor chassis, it was the first American attempt at tank design during World War I. The vehicle was never adopted, but it marked the starting point of U.S. armored development. Moscow, 1920s. A giant phone-shaped kiosk promoted the first Soviet public payphones. It became one of the earliest examples of advertising in Soviet urban space. Geronimo, the famed leader of the Chiricahua Apache, photographed in 1905 at age 76. For over 25 years, he commanded raids and campaigns against U.S. and Mexican forces, refusing to surrender Apache land. Even after his capture, his name became a lasting symbol of resistance and unbroken spirit. Al Capone's mugshot, taken at Alcatraz in 1934 shortly after his transfer from Atlanta Penitentiary. Once America's most notorious mob boss, he was reduced to inmate number 85, stripped of influence inside the fortress prison. Suffering from neurosyphilis, his power collapsed as quickly as it had risen. A communal cell in the Alexandrovsk penal prison, Russia, 1890s. Political prisoners, common criminals, and exiles were often housed together in harsh, overcrowded conditions. Icons on the wall reveal how religion remained a rare source of comfort inside the Siberian exile system. Russian explorer Nikolai Mikljuho-Maklay, with his servant boy, Ahmad, 1870s. Mikljuho-Maklay became famous for his ethnographic work in New Guinea, where he lived among indigenous tribes. Ahmad, a Javanese boy, accompanied him on many expeditions and remained his loyal assistant. Germany, 1973. During the oil crisis, fuel shortages forced drivers to improvise. Here, a Volkswagen van is humorously converted into a horse-drawn carriage. The crisis highlighted Europe's heavy dependence on imported oil and sparked new debates on energy alternatives. Moscow, 1937. A carnival at the Palace of Culture of the Stalin automobile plant celebrated the anniversary of the Stalin Constitution. Workers in masks and costumes danced under decorations, embodying the era's mix of festivity and propaganda. Despite the cheerful setting, it was the height of the Great Purge, when many factory employees faced repression. Kazan, 1909, the Eastern Bavaria brewery stunned visitors with a pavilion shaped like a giant beer bottle. The structure stood as both an advertisement and a bar, serving drinks directly inside. It became one of the most photographed attractions of the exhibition. A Siberian shaman in 1903, Russia, wearing ritual garments covered with iron pendants and sacred symbols. Each piece of metal was believed to carry protective power and amplify contact with the spirit world. His drum, partly visible, was the main tool for entering trance and guiding ceremonies. A red guard during China's Cultural Revolution, covered in badges of Mao Zedong. These badges became powerful symbols of loyalty, worn by millions as proof of revolutionary zeal. The small book in his hand is Mao's Little Red Book, the central text of the movement. Elephants of the Nikitin Brothers Circus during a walk in Kazan, early 1900s. The Nikitin brothers were pioneers of Russian circus culture, famous for bringing exotic animals to provincial cities. Their elephant parades through parks and streets became legendary spectacles for the public. Ice Cream Show in London, 1934. 2 women pose with a giant, twice-a-cone model, advertising Purity ice cream. Such playful marketing stunts were common in the interwar years, drawing crowds to new consumer products. Snake Catcher, 1890. The man stands with a cigar and revolver, wearing chaps made of animal hide for protection. Behind him hang massive snake skins, trophies of his dangerous trade. Alexei Stakhanov, with fellow Donbass miners in Kudyevka, now Stakhanov, 1935. Stakhanov became a Soviet icon after mining 102 tons of coal in a single shift, 14 times the quota. His feat launched the Stakhanovite movement, symbolizing industrial heroism under Stalin. Valentina Tereshkova, the first woman in space, examines the Apollo command module at the Johnson Space Center in 1977. Her 1963 Vostok 6 mission made her the only woman to fly a solo spaceflight. This visit symbolized Cold War rivals finding common ground in space exploration. First Lady Pat Nixon visits school number 42 in Moscow during the U.S. delegation's trip to the USSR in 1972. Her presence symbolized a softer side of Cold War diplomacy, focusing on culture and education. The visit took place the same year as the historic Moscow summit between Richard Nixon and Leonid Brezhnev. A British soldier, both arms amputated at the elbows, works the fields in France, 1918. He uses primitive prosthetics designed for manual labor, showing how war injuries forced innovation and rehabilitation. His return to farm work symbolized resilience after the devastation of World War I. Fidel Castro jumps off a Soviet-made T-34 tank during the Bay of Pigs invasion, Cuba, April 17, 1961. Personally leading his forces, Castro coordinated the defense against the CIA-backed exile army. The failed invasion cemented his power and pushed Cuba firmly into the Soviet camp. Children inside a wooden mock-up of a T-26 tank, Leningrad, winter 1937. The T-26 was the backbone of the Red Army's armored forces in the 1930s, widely used for training and propaganda. Such models familiarized children with military imagery during Stalin's push for total mobilization. In 1938, the ideal woman was embodied by 20-year-old model June Cox. At 168 centimeters tall and 56 kilograms, she was presented as the perfect balance of health and symmetry. Her figure became a pre-war beauty benchmark, long before fashion idolized extreme thinness. In 1909, Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung visited Clark University in the U.S., marking a milestone for psychoanalysis. Seated with them was University President G. Stanley Hall, who had invited them to lecture. Standing behind, Abraham Brill, Ernest Jones, and Sandor Ferenczi, the pioneers who carried Freud's ideas across the Atlantic. Armenian priest before battle with Turkish forces, 1920. Clad in bandoliers and holding both a cross and a rifle, he symbolized the union of faith and armed resistance. During the Turkish-Armenian War, many clergy took up arms, turning churches into fortresses of survival. Winston Churchill feeding deer in Richmond Park, March 25, 1963. At 89 years old, the wartime leader still carried his signature cigar while leaning on a cane. Even in frailty, he projected the same unshakable presence that defined his political life. Salt mining at Lake Baskinchuk, Astrakhan Governorate, Russian Empire, 1870s to 1880s. Workers carved salt from the lake bed with wooden mallets, hauling it by carts through the shallow water. Baskinchuk supplied up to 80% of the empire's salt, feeding trade routes across Russia. Michael Harding, a 46-year-old unemployed man, demonstrates his sobriety to police after being stopped in a car full of empty bottles. February 17, 1951. To prove he wasn't drunk, he performed a contortion test, picking up coins from the ground with his mouth while holding his ankles. The bizarre stunt convinced officers he was sober. In the 1930s, Indian Maharajas held a ritual known as Tulabara, where a ruler was weighed on a giant scale against gold, silver, or jewels. The wealth equivalent to his body weight was then distributed to temples, the poor, or political causes. This photo shows a newly enthroned Raja seated on the scale during his ceremonial weighing in gold. Queen Elizabeth II meets Hollywood actress Jane Mansfield in London, 1957. Mansfield, known for her daring neckline dresses, caused a stir by appearing in a low-cut gown at a royal film premiere. The moment became one of the most talked-about cultural clashes between British royalty and American glamour. Anne-Marie Dupont, known as Miss Sputnik, became a Parisian striptease sensation in the late 1950s. Her act, styled around the Soviet satellite launch, featured a glittering Sputnik prop and space-themed choreography. She even invited U.S. President Eisenhower to one of her shows. though his response remains unknown. Bradford, England, October 24, 1935. Miners emerge from the pits wearing protective goggles to shield their eyes from the sudden sunlight. After hours in near total darkness underground, the bright surface light could cause temporary blindness. This striking photo captured both the harshness of mining life and the ingenuity used to protect workers. A convict branded SK, Siberian penal laborer, on his back, photographed in 1891. The triple mark shows he escaped 3 times, but was caught each time. Such tattoos were burned into the skin as permanent punishment and identification. Gertrude Lintz with Gargantua, the world-famous circus gorilla, 1940s. Originally rescued as a sick baby, Gargantua became Ringling Bro's biggest attraction. His shows drew millions, making him one of the most famous animals of the century. Egyptians climbing the massive stone blocks of the Great Pyramid, 1880. At that time, ascending the ancient wonder was a common spectacle for visitors. The image captures the raw scale of the stones and the daring of those who attempted the climb. Special church candles shaped like body parts, a heart, arms, or legs, sold as votive offerings. Buyers lit them while praying for healing of specific ailments. New York, 1929. Food aid with English-labeled canned goods in a Minsk store, 1946. These supplies were part of U.S. relief shipments after World War II, helping feed the devastated Soviet population. The scene shows a Soviet mother receiving American products just a year after the war's end. The wreck of the Russian cruiser Varyag being salvaged by the Japanese, 1905. Scuttled during the Battle of Chemulpo Bay to avoid capture, the iconic warship became a symbol of Russian naval bravery. Japan later raised and repaired it for service in its own navy. French soldiers on horseback pass through a street while the airship Dupuy de l'Homme hovers above, circa 1914. One of France's earliest military dirigibles, it marked the shift from traditional cavalry to aerial reconnaissance at the start of World War I. Fyodor Chaliapin in stage costume, Moscow, 1908. A legendary Russian bass, he was celebrated for combining powerful vocals with striking dramatic presence. Members of the Kufalo tribe perform a traditional funeral ceremony in Côte d'Ivoire, 1968. Wearing horned masks and carrying large drums, they combined music, dance, and ritual to honor the dead and maintain ancestral traditions. A copy of History of the World War, published after World War I, but before World War II. At the time, the 1914-1918 conflict was referred to simply as the World War, since a second global conflict had not yet occurred. A medical device used in France, 1890, to stabilize a broken jaw. Such early orthopedic apparatuses relied on external metal frames and wires, reflecting the limited reconstructive techniques available before modern maxillofacial surgery. German paratroopers descend over Crete during the airborne invasion of May 1941. The operation, known as the Battle of Crete, was the first large-scale airborne assault in history and resulted in heavy losses despite eventual German victory. A man demonstrates an early electrotherapy device in the United States. 1907. Such machines delivered mild electric currents to stimulate muscles, reflecting experimental medical practices of the early 20th century. American circus performer Jack Earl, one of the world's tallest men at 7'7" in 231 centimeters, photographed with a fellow performer in the 1930s. Earl, who had acromegaly, toured with Ringling Brothers and became a well-known figure in sideshow entertainment. A Japanese kamikaze crashes into the deck of the USS Saratoga on February 21, 1945. The carrier was hit multiple times during the Iwo Jima campaign, suffering heavy damage but remaining afloat. The violin of Wallace Hartley, bandleader on the RMS Titanic, April 1912. Hartley and his orchestra played as the ship sank, and this instrument was later recovered and preserved as one of the most iconic artifacts from the disaster. A 19th-century doctor's medical kit containing glass vials of powders, tinctures, and pills.
With limited scientific treatments available, such portable kits relied heavily on herbal mixtures and rudimentary remedies. Betty Brosmer, American model and pinup icon, photographed in the 1950s. Known for her extreme hourglass figure, she became one of the most recognizable faces of mid-20th century glamour modeling. The wife of a knife thrower poses during a dangerous circus act in the United States, 1931. Such performances relied on precision and trust, becoming a popular but perilous attraction in early 20th century sideshows. A fake Japanese hunting license circulated in the United States after Pearl Harbor in 1941. It reflected wartime propaganda and the widespread anti-Japanese sentiment of the era. Princeton University football players, in a scrimmage during the late 1800s, early American football was played with minimal protective gear, and the lack of helmets made the sport especially dangerous. A life vest used on the RMS Titanic in 1912, made of canvas and cork. Survivors relied on these flotation devices during the disaster, though many were not enough to withstand the freezing waters of the North Atlantic. A vintage tin of New Era potato chips, early 20th century, marketed as scientifically processed and a healthy food, it shows how advertising often used pseudoscientific claims to attract buyers. A propaganda billboard in Alabama during the Selma March, 1965, portraying Martin Luther King Jr. as tied to communism. Such efforts reflected FBI concerns over his influence and were used by segregationists to discredit the civil rights movement. Marilyn Monroe sings Happy Birthday to President John F. Kennedy at Madison Square Garden, May 19, 1962. The performance, arranged months in advance, became one of her most famous appearances and fueled speculation about her connection to the president. A captured Soviet T-28 medium tank with a Finnish crew near Lappi, Finland, July 8, 1941. The T-28, first introduced in the 1930s, was one of the earliest multi-turreted tanks used in World War II. Marie Curie in her laboratory, early 1900s. After she and Pierre Curie discovered radium in 1898, the element was widely and dangerously used in consumer products before its health risks were understood. Rescue crews searched the wreckage after the Halifax explosion in Canada, December 6, 1917. The blast occurred when a French munition ship collided with another vessel in the harbor, killing nearly 2,000 people and leveling much of the city. A Lone Ranger atomic bomb, ring given as a cereal box prize in the 1940s. The toy incredibly contained small amounts of radioactive material, making it one of the most dangerous promotional items ever distributed to children. A wealthy family in Monrovia, Liberia, 1910s. Liberia was founded in the 1820s by freed African Americans repatriated from the United States, many of whom established an elite class that adopted Western customs and dominated local populations. Sir Hiram Maxim's Pipe of Peace, an inhaler marketed in the early 1900s for asthma relief. Better known as the inventor of the Maxim gun, he also patented this menthol-based medical device. A blind hurdy-gurdy player with his guide boy in Poltava, Ukraine, 1910. Street musicians like him relied on performing folk songs to survive in the early 20th century. Private First Class Clarence Ayres reads news of Germany's surrender to captured German soldiers on a New York pier, May 8, 1945. The announcement of VE Day marked the official end of World War II in Europe.